has its own grammar, so phrase structure is different in different languages. The basic principles of how phrase structure works are universal and so are true for all languages. But the actual phrase structure in the syntax of different languages is what differs. Because the structure of sentences in different languages differs, the tree diagrams that represent those structures look very different. So here's an example from English, as we started looking at in our last tutorial. But just compare how the tree is a different style in Fijian. And then also here's a sample from Fijian Hindi. Most of the similarities between these trees relate to the way syntax works universally. The differences are to do with facts about the phrase structure of individual languages. One of the similarities between these different languages is that in each, the verb and the object are together in a verb phrase. Remember in the last tutorial we saw that over 90% of languages put the verb and the object together so they can form a verb phrase. Remember also that language has a hierarchical structure. Constituents join together to build bigger constituents. A verb phrase consists of a verb and its object. A verb can join together with its object to build a verb phrase, but only if the verb and the object are next to each other. The verb and object noun phrase join together to form a bigger constituent, the verb phrase, before that then joins with the subject noun phrase to make an even bigger unit, the sentence. If the subject comes between the verb and the object, there can't be a verb phrase, like in the VSO language of Maori. The Maori sentence here is, "The man drank the water." The fact that nearly 92% of languages are not like Maori and instead put the verb and the object together in a verb phrase shows us that languages prefer to combine constituents into larger constituents and have a hierarchical nested structure. Phrases and sentences are constructed by speakers as they're speaking. Speakers generate phrases and sentences using the syntactic principles of the language they speak. These principles are unconscious rules stored in the minds of the speakers. We represent these principles as phrase structure rules. Together, the phrase structure rules of the language comprise the phrase structure grammar of the language. As well as the phrasal rules, there is also a sentence rule, the rule about how to build a complete sentence out of these phrases. Traditionally, linguists say that for English, the sentence rule is basically this. This means that a sentence consists of a noun phrase, the subject, and a verb phrase. These rules are used to generate sentences. Believe it or not, every time we speak, our minds are going through a process, applying the phrase structure rules of our language and building phrases and sentences as they come out of our mouths. It is online generation of language. It takes a lot of mental processing power. You might remember in the last tutorial we said that in a phrase we must have a word which is called the head. This is the core of the phrase, what the phrase can't exist without. It's the most important part of any phrase because it is the part that gives the phrase its most important component of meaning. In the phrase, "the really very ugly cat," the head of the phrase is cat. The phrase is talking about a kind of cat, not a kind of ugliness. The head is where the phrase gets its category from. This is a noun phrase because the head is a noun, cat. Look at the phrase here. The very ugly dogs inside the house. This is a noun phrase because its head is dogs, which is a noun. Very ugly is an adjective phrase because its head is ugly, which is an adjective. Inside the house is a prepositional phrase because the head is inside, which is a preposition. Phrases have two main parts, a head and a complement, which can also be called a modifier. The head is the part of the phrase that must be there, it's obligatory. You can have phrases without a complement, but you can't have a phrase without a head. A phrase is still a phrase, even if it has only one word, its head, in it. A phrase can also contain a complement, which is a phrase in itself that tells us more about the head. Complements have to be there, but sometimes they're just implied. They complete the meaning of the head and make the phrase grammatical. In the examples here, the example phrases are in brackets and the head is in bold type. It is important to understand this concept of complements because now we're going to talk about argument structure, which you will remember is the other important area of syntax along with phrase structure. Together, these two areas overlap and work together to provide the framework of principles that build meaning into sentences. Argument structure is all about how verbs relate to their complements and their subjects. Some constituents like noun phrases or prepositional phrases are complements. They are required by the verb. These are called arguments of the verb. The area of grammar that deals with this relationship is called argument structure. Some verbs refer to events that involve only one participant. These verbs only require one argument. So a verb like sleep only needs one argument. For example, Mary slept. Other verbs like bite need two arguments. For example, the cat bit the dog. Then there are some verbs like give that need three arguments. As this example here, Mary gave the book to Tom. A sentence like Mary gave is ungrammatical because it's incomplete. It's missing two of its arguments. Likewise, Mary gave the book, or Mary gave to Tom, or gave the book to Tom are all ungrammatical because they're missing one of the three arguments that they need. This issue, how many arguments certain verbs need, is called transitivity. Verbs like sleep that need only one argument are intransitive. Verbs like bite that need two arguments are transitive, and verbs like give that need three arguments are ditransitive. Each argument has a different grammatical relation, the job that it has in relation to the verb in the sentence. All verbs need a subject. So if there is only one argument, as with an intransitive verb, that argument will be the subject. In an intransitive sentence like Mary slept, the one argument is the subject, Mary. In a transitive sentence where there are two arguments, like the cat bit the dog, one of the arguments, and in this case it's the cat, is the subject, and the other, in this case the dog, is the object. In a ditransitive sentence where the verb needs three arguments, like Mary gave Tom the book, one of the arguments, in this case Mary, is the subject. The other two, Tom and the book, are both kinds of objects. Tom is an indirect object and the book is a direct object because it is having the verb gave done to it directly. Other kinds of ditransitive sentences have different grammatical relations. So in the sentence, Mary gave the book to Tom, Tom now has the preposition to in front of him. Mary is still a subject and the book is still a direct object, but Tom is now not an object, he's an oblique. Why? Because an object is a complement that is a noun phrase on its own, like Tom or the book. But an oblique is a complement that is a prepositional phrase, like to Tom. So, in summary, the grammatical relations are subject, object, which can be a direct object or an indirect object, and oblique. The most important thing the grammar of a language has to be able to do is to tell us which participant mentioned in a sentence is the subject, which is the object, and so forth. This is obviously a key to clearly communicating who is doing what to whom. This means a language has to have a way of expressing or coding the grammatical relation of each argument in a sentence. In an intransitive sentence, there's never any trouble working out who is the subject. There's only one argument, so that has to be the subject. We always know who the subject is in Mary slept because there's only Mary. But in a transitive sentence, how do we know which of the arguments is the subject and which is the object? In the cat bit the dog, how do we know that the cat is the subject and not the dog? There are three ways that languages can code grammatical relations so we know which is the subject and which is the object. These are word order, case marking, and agreement. So we'll look at each of these three and explain how languages use them. In English, the main way grammatical relations are coded is by word order. The subject comes before the verb and the object comes after it. That's why we say that English has the basic sentence structure SVO. Other languages also use word order to show grammatical relations, but the order is different to English. For example, in Arabic, the sentence structure is VSO, as here in "The teacher read the book." Case involves attaching an affix or an adposition, that is a preposition or a postposition, to the noun to tell us its grammatical relation. In Latin, it doesn't matter what order the nouns are in. Instead, the nouns have a suffix that tells us their grammatical relation. The noun that is the subject has the case marker us. The noun that is the object has the case marker All of these sentences here mean the master sees the wolf in Latin, and it doesn't matter that the word order is switched as long as the case markers are correct and the meaning is clear. English has no case marking on nouns. For example, the cat bit the dog and the dog bit the cat. In both sentences, the cat is just the cat, whether it's the subject or the object. It doesn't change its form at all. The same is true with the dog. But English does have case marking on pronouns. So we say, I saw her, she saw me. We only say I or she if the person is the subject, and we only say me or her if the person is the object. Agreement involves attaching something to the verb to tell us which argument is the subject and which one is the object. In English, we don't have much verb agreement, only the suffix s. So we would say, I see her, but she sees me. The suffix s tells us that the subject is third person singular, so he, she, or it. The suffix agrees with the subject. In some other languages, agreement is much more important than in English, and it does all the work. In a language like that, word order might not matter, like in Latin, where the case markers did all the work of making the subject and objects clear. Look carefully at this example from Yimas, a Sepik language from Papua New Guinea. All of these sentences mean the men saw the woman. In Yimas, all nouns belong to a noun class. In the example sentences, the first prefix attached to the verb agrees with the noun class and the number, singular or plural, of the argument. The order of the actual nouns in relation to the verb doesn't matter. All arguments have a grammatical relation, but all arguments also have a semantic role or a role in the meaning. The most important semantic roles are actor and undergoer. An actor does the action and is directly responsible for the event. An undergoer has the action happen to them. Now there are three kinds of actors: agent, force, and cause. The most important kind of actor is agent. An agent does something on purpose. They're usually human, but can sometimes be an animal. So for example, the boy killed the cobra, or the cat caught the bird. Agents often do something that affects a second argument, so in these examples, the cobra and the bird. They can also perform an act that does not involve a second argument. For example, the boy hurried. Now, a force performs the action but not intentionally. So for example, malaria killed the boy, or the storm destroyed the crops. A cause doesn't perform an action, it causes the action to happen. So we have these examples here: the delay disrupted the schedule, or the rain kept the boys indoors. Now here are some examples of sentences with undergoers marked. The undergoer is the person or thing having the action done to it. Undergoers can also be undergoing a change of state or location, or be described as being in a particular state or location. So the boy killed the cobra. Tom cooked the chicken. The cobra is dead. The chicken is cooked. The pen is on the desk. The book is on the ground. Tom put the pen on the desk. The book fell onto the ground. There are quite a few other semantic roles, and not all linguists agree on them all. Your goal is only to understand that these kinds of relationships between words and meaning exist, and that they differ in the way they work in different languages. We will look at some of the most important and generally accepted ones, giving a short explanation and a few examples. A benefactive is someone or something who benefits from the event. In English, benefactives are marked with the preposition for, but do note that for also has other jobs. So here we can see Tom cooked a meal for Mary. The boys bought a book for their sister. A recipient is someone or something who receives something as a result of the event. So in English, recipients are marked with the preposition to, which also has other jobs in other situations. So Nick passed a note to Melissa. The salesman gave a brochure to the customer. Many languages treat benefactives and recipients in the same way, and this is called dative. An experiencer experiences or senses a mental, emotional, physical or sensory state. Experiencers are always animate, alive, and usually human. So for example, Alfredo likes chips. The old man feels sick. We thought they had left. English has some pairs of sensory verbs, one with an agent and one with an experiencer. So for example, we have Mary watched the fight and Mary saw the fight. Tom, the agent, listened to the announcement. As an experiencer, Tom heard the announcement. The visitor smelled the rotten fish and the visitor smelled the rotten fish. So in this last example, smelled fits both categories as an agent and as an experiencer. A stimulus is the counterpart to an experiencer. It is the cause of the experience. So Mary saw the fight, Tom heard the announcement, and the visitor smelled the rotten fish. An instrument is used by an actor to perform the action. So the hammer broke the window, the key opened the door, and the bullet killed Tom. In English, instruments can be paraphrased with a prepositional phrase using with. So for example, the window was broken with the hammer. Next we have locationals. There are several different locationals, and the four most important types are locative, so the location where an event happens. Louisa waited in the pub. Goal, which is the end point of an event, so Nick drove to the shop. Source, which is the starting point of an event. The robbers left the bank. And finally temporal, so the location in time when an event happens. I arrived last week. In English, locationals can be expressed by noun phrases, prepositional phrases, or adverbs. English uses different prepositions to express different kinds of locationals. Semantic roles are not the same thing as grammatical relations. Grammatical relations can't be defined on the basis of meaning. Actors are usually subjects and undergoers are usually objects, but they don't have to be. Subjects can have a range of semantic roles, that is, roles in the meaning of a sentence. So, the boy killed the cobra. The subject here is an agent. The boy enjoyed the film. This time the subject is an experiencer. The storm destroyed the house. The subject here is the force. Rain stopped the game. This time the subject is a cause. The cobra was killed by the boy. In this case, it's an undergoer. The cobra is dead, also an undergoer. The coconut fell to the ground, another undergoer. The key unlocked the door. Here the subject is an instrument. Bats inhabit these caves. Here we have another undergoer. And Louisa received the parcel, so she's a recipient. Objects can have a range of semantic roles too. So the boy killed the cobra. Here the object is an undergoer. The boy enjoyed the film. This time the object is a cause. The boy dropped the coconut. Again an undergoer. The delay upset Louisa. This time the object is an experiencer. The train approached the station. This time it's a goal. And the bus left the university. And here the object is the source. Languages have quite a few ways of changing the argument structure of a sentence. One important way is by using a passive construction. In sentences with an ordinary transitive verb like kill or bite, the subject is an actor. And the object also has a semantic role. It is an undergoer. For example, in a sentence like John killed the mosquito, John has the semantic role of agent and the grammatical relation of subject, while the mosquito has the semantic role of undergoer and the grammatical relation of object. But this changes if we switch the sentence around. Let's have a look. The mosquito was killed by John. Now the mosquito still has the semantic role of undergoer, but now it has the grammatical relation of subject. John still has the semantic role of actor, but now he isn't even an object because he has a preposition by, and so he's now an oblique. We can even leave the oblique out completely, just leave John out. The mosquito was killed. The issue here is what we call voice. The sentence, John killed the mosquito, is in active voice, but the sentence, the mosquito was killed by John, is in passive voice. Active sentences are more basic than passive sentences because the actor is the subject. They're functionally more basic and they're grammatically less complicated. Passive sentences are grammatically more complicated. They have an auxiliary verb, be, actually also often they have got as well, and the actor is in a prepositional phrase with by instead of just being a noun phrase. So if a passive sentence has basically the same meaning as an active sentence, why do languages have a passive structure at all? Basically, passives exist so we can manipulate the way information is presented. Passives are used for two reasons. Firstly, to emphasize the undergoer. For example, Tom was run over by a car. We say it that way because we're interested in Tom, not the car. We make Tom the subject and the car is demoted to an oblique. We may even get rid of the car altogether and just say Tom was run over. The second reason is to push the actor into the background. We might want to do this because we don't know who the actor is. So my car was stolen, but I don't know who stole it. Or maybe we don't care who the actor is. The parcel was delivered, I don't really care who delivered it. Or maybe we don't want to say who the actor is. So your application was rejected by me, but I don't want to tell you that.